JLab. You, me, and beyond. The rose and the shadow, Beauty and the Beast. Here's a question to sit with before we start. Why does almost every culture on Earth tell some version of this same story? A woman, alone with a beast, in an enchanted house at night. And somehow, that's the version that survives. Not the story where the hero kills the monster. The story where someone stays. Greece told it as Cupid and Psyche. Norway told it as East of the Sun and West of the Moon. India, Russia, West Africa all have their own animal bridegroom. And in 1740s, France, a novelist named Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve wrote it down as La Belle et la Bête, Beauty and the Beast. Disney gave us the yellow dress and the ballroom, but underneath the ball gown, this story is doing something much older. It's a map of the psyche, some would say, or the soul, if you prefer that language. Today, we're going to open that map up. I'm your host, and this is JLab, You, Me, and Beyond, a show about the ideas hiding inside the stories we thought were just for kids. Segment 1, Why Fairy Tales Carry Architecture. Let's start with a claim, and then I'll back it up. Fairy tales are not badly written realism. They're not trying and failing to be believable. They're something closer to dream logic, compressed, symbolic, and built to survive being told badly by tired people around fires for 1,000 years. Anything that didn't matter got worn away. What's left is architecture. This is the premise of a whole field, comparative mythology. Joseph Campbell built a career on it. Carl Jung built a psychology on it. Bruno Bettelheim wrote an entire book, The Uses of Enchantment, arguing that fairy tales are how children process fear, desire, and separation, long before they have words for any of it. So when we sit down with Beauty and the Beast, we're not asking, is this a true story? We're asking, what does this shape keep doing across hundreds of retellings in dozens of unrelated cultures? What's the load-bearing wall? And the answer, pretty consistently, is this. The story is about the relationship between the visible self and the hidden self, and about what kind of attention it takes to let the hidden self change. Let's take that apart, character by character. Segment 2, The Beast, what we hide because we think it's unlovable. The beast is cursed, not evil. That distinction is doing a lot of work, and it's easy to miss. An evil character is fixed. A cursed character is a good thing, obscured. In esoteric and alchemical traditions, this is a very specific idea, that the raw base material isn't worthless, it's just unrefined. Alchemists called it the prima materia, the first matter. Lead in the old metaphor, not garbage, just gold that hasn't been through the fire yet. That's the beast. Underneath the fur and the temper is a prince, meaning underneath the anger and the isolation is something that was always whole. The curse isn't punishment for being bad. It's what happened after he acted badly once, out of vanity. And the punishment fits a much older idea. Pride creates isolation. He shuts a starving old woman out in the cold, and the story's answer is, fine. Now you'll know what isolation actually feels like from the inside for as long as it takes you to understand it. Alchemists had a whole vocabulary for this process, and it maps onto the film almost too neatly. The work started with the nigredo, the blackening, the stage where the raw material is broken down, decayed, made ugly before it can be made anything else. That's the beast at the film's opening. Isolated, furious, physically monstrous, further from the prince he was than at any other point in the story. Only after the blackening comes the slow work of purification, what alchemists called the albedo, the whitening. And only after that, the rubedo, the reddening, the final stage where the base material becomes gold. The rose, notably, is red. None of that is likely a deliberate reference on Disney's part, but it's exactly why the pattern is interesting. Nobody had to design it in. The shape of things must get worse, uglier, more exposed before they can be made whole is just how transformation seems to work, in chemistry as metaphor and in actual human change alike. And storytellers keep independently rediscovering it. That's not a fairy godmother being cruel. That's how shame actually behaves. It doesn't announce itself as a moral lesson. It just leaves you alone in a castle with rooms you're too afraid to enter. Carl Jung had a name for this hidden, hard-to-look-at material, the shadow, not evil in Jung's sense, just disowned. The parts of a person that got exiled from their sense of self because somewhere, someone decided those parts were unacceptable. Anger, grief, need, jealousy, the parts we perform not having in public. Jung's whole argument was that the shadow doesn't go away when you refuse to look at it. It goes underground, into a castle if you like, and it runs the show from there, usually worse because now it's unsupervised. The beast, then, isn't a monster in the story. He's what happens to a person's undealt with parts when nobody's willing to sit with them. Segment 3, Belle, the one who looks beneath the surface. Here's what's easy to miss about Belle, especially in the Disney version. She is never a passive prize. In almost every fairy tale in this family, Psyche, the various East of the Sun tellings, the heroine's defining trait is the same. She looks closer when everyone else looks away. Belle reads. She questions the provincial life around her. She notices Gaston is handsome and finds him repellent anyway, which tells you the story isn't interested in appearances being trustworthy in either direction. And critically, she walks into the castle to save her father of her own will with open eyes. Nobody tricks her into it. In esoteric traditions, especially Gnostic and Hermetic ones, there's a recurring figure called Sophia, literally Greek for wisdom. Sophia isn't cold, abstract intelligence. She's wisdom as a kind of active compassion, the capacity to look at something fallen or wounded or frightening and see what it actually is instead of what it looks like. That's Belle's function in the story. She's not there to fix the beast. She's there to see him, accurately, before he's done anything to deserve it. And that ordering matters enormously. The seeing comes first. The change comes after, not the other way around. If you want the psychological version of this, Belle is the part of a person capable of turning toward the shadow instead of away from it. Jung would say that integration, becoming whole, requires exactly this move. Not defeating the shadow, not exiling it further, turning toward it, staying, and letting it be known. Segment 4, the older pattern, Cupid, Psyche, and the animal bridegroom. I want to widen the lens for a second because Beauty and the Beast didn't come from nowhere. The oldest clear ancestor is the Roman story of Cupid and Psyche, recorded by Apuleius in the 2nd century. Psyche is married to an unseen husband who visits only at night and forbids her from looking at him. Curiosity gets the better of her. She lights a lamp, sees he's a god, a drop of hot wax wakes him, and he flees. She then has to complete a series of impossible tasks to earn him back. Then there's the Norwegian tale East of the Sun and West of the Moon. A woman marries a polar bear who is a cursed prince by night. Same forbidden-looking motif. Same loss caused by impatience or fear. Same long, difficult journey to undo it. Notice the shape that survives across all of these. Rome to Norway to 18th century France to 1990s. Hollywood. Something is hidden or cursed and cannot be forced into the open. A woman enters that hidden world willingly. The relationship requires patience and trust before the truth is revealed, not after. Premature or fear-driven action, looking too soon, running too soon, judging by appearance, nearly destroys everything. Restoration only comes through staying with what's difficult long enough for it to change. That's not a coincidence repeated by accident across unconnected oral traditions. That's a pattern doing something useful for the human mind, encoding, in story form, something true about how trust, transformation, and intimacy actually work. You cannot rush someone's unhiding. You especially cannot rush your own. Segment 5, the symbolic architecture, Castle, Rose, Mirror. Every version of this story hands the heroine 3 objects, more or less. Disney kept all 3, and each one is carrying weight. The castle is enchanted and isolated, cut off from the town, from time, from ordinary life. Symbolically, an enchanted sealed structure like this usually stands in for the inner world, specifically a mind or heart that has closed itself off after an injury. Its servants are trapped in objects, its owner won't leave, its clocks, quite literally in this version, are still ticking down. That's not incidental. A closed inner world doesn't stop time, it just stops living in it. The rose is the clock. Every petal that falls is time the beast doesn't get back. In older symbolic traditions, the rose has carried associations with divine love, the unfolding of the soul, and mortality, a flower whose whole beauty depends on the fact that it doesn't last. The rose is the story's argument against waiting forever. Transformation has a season. Love, if it's going to happen, has to happen inside a real deadline, not because deadlines are dramatic, but because indefinite deferral is just another word for never. The mirror shows the truth beyond what's in front of you. Belle's father, home and safety, things happening far away and out of sight. Mirrors across esoteric traditions are almost always about a kind of sight that isn't literal. Self-knowledge, honest reflection, seeing past the immediate surface of things. It's not incidental that Belle uses the mirror and not force to eventually see and rescue the beast from the mob at the end. The story keeps insisting, the tool that saves people here is accurate seeing, not strength. Segment 6. Gaston. The inverted curse. Now here's the part of the story I think gets underrated, because Gaston is usually played for comic villainy, and that undersells what he's doing structurally. Gaston is never cursed. He doesn't need to be. He's already exactly what he wants to be seen as, and that's the entire problem. He is handsome, admired, physically perfect by every external measure the town has, and he is, underneath all of that, exactly as shallow as he appears. There's no gap between his surface and his depth. There's no depth to find. Compare the two men directly. The beast Gaston. Appearance, monstrous. Admired, perfect. Interior arc. Learns humility, patience, care. Curdles further into vanity. Relationship to truth. Hides from it, then faces it. Never confronts it at all. Ending. Transformed, destroyed. That's the story's actual thesis on appearances. They lie in both directions. Ugliness can conceal something whole and unfinished. Beauty can conceal something completely hollow. The moral isn't, don't judge by appearances in some soft greeting card sense. It's sharper than that. Appearance tells you nothing reliable at all about which way a person is moving. Only their willingness to be seen accurately does that. Segment 6, B. The servants. The faculties that keep working under the spell. Before we move to the psychological synthesis, I want to spend a minute on a detail that's easy to enjoy as comic relief and easy to skip past as meaningful: the enchanted household. Lumiere, Cogsworth, Mrs. Potts, Chip, every one of them is a person trapped in an object, and every one of them keeps doing their job anyway. That detail is doing more work than it looks like. Lumiere is light, illumination, charm, the part of a mind that improvises and performs and keeps spirits up even in a house under a curse. Cogsworth is a clock, order, discipline, the internal manager keeping track of time and rules, often to a fault. Mrs. Potts is warmth without condition. She mothers Belle from the moment she arrives, no test required. And Chip, a literal teacup, is the youngest voice in the house, curiosity and hope, uncomplicated by history. Here's the thing worth sitting with. None of them stop functioning because the house is cursed. They're diminished, quite literally shrunk into objects, but not destroyed. Insight, order, warmth, and hope are all still present and working, even while the self of the house, the beast, is shut down and hiding upstairs. If you take the castle as an image of an inner world closed off after injury, which we talked about a few minutes ago, then the servants are a fairly precise picture of something people who've done any kind of inner work will recognize. Your capacities don't vanish when you're struggling. They get sidelined, muted, boxed into smaller roles than they deserve. But warmth, humor, order, and hope tend to keep quietly running in the background, waiting for the rest of the system to catch back up to them. The curse doesn't switch off the household. It just shrinks everyone's role until the master of the house is ready to let them work at full size again. Segment 7. The Jungian synthesis. Integration, not defeat. Let's pull the psychological reading together, because I think it's the most useful lens of the ones we've covered. Jung's model of individuation, his word for becoming a whole integrated person, depends on a specific move. You do not defeat the shadow. You do not banish it, shame it, or pretend it isn't there. You meet it, you stay long enough to actually know it, and eventually it stops needing to run the show from the basement because it's no longer locked out of the house. That is, structurally, the entire plot of this film. Belle doesn't storm the castle and slay the beast. She doesn't manage him either. Spend the whole film carefully avoiding his anger. She's there when he rages, she pushes back, she leaves when he's genuinely dangerous, and she returns when he's willing to be different. That's not passivity. That's one of the more accurate depictions of what integrating a difficult, disowned part of a person, or a relationship with one, actually requires: boundaries, patience, and enough real contact that change becomes possible instead of performed. And the reward for that integration, in the story's own logic, isn't that the beast becomes normal. It's that he becomes whole. The prince was never a rejection of the beast. He was the beast's completed form. Nothing about him was thrown away. Jung would call that individuation. Alchemists called it the magnum opus, the great work, turning base material into gold, not by discarding the lead, but by transforming it. 8. A brief word on the Christian mystical reading. I want to flag one more lens quickly because it's common and it's worth being honest about its limits. Some readers, particularly in Christian mystical traditions, see in this story an echo of a very old religious idea, that love, not force, is what redeems something broken. The beast as a stand-in for a fallen or wounded humanity. Belle's compassion as a stand-in for grace. The transformation as a stand-in for redemption freely offered rather than earned by conquest. I want to be careful here because this is clearly an interpretive reading layered on afterward. Villeneuve wasn't writing 18th century theology, and Disney wasn't either. But the fact that a Christian mystical reading, a Jungian psychological reading, and an alchemical reading all converge on roughly the same shape, something whole, hidden inside something wounded, made visible through patient, uncoerced love, tells you the story is tapping into something genuinely cross-cultural. Not one tradition's private property. A shared human intuition, dressed differently depending on who's doing the telling. The core question. So here's where I want to leave this one. Underneath the ballroom scene and the singing candlestick, Beauty and the Beast is asking a fairly unglamorous, very old question. Can you learn to see what's actually there, in yourself or in someone else, underneath fear, pride, and old wounds, before it's had the chance to change? Not after, before. That's the harder version of the question, and it's the one the story actually insists on. Belle doesn't fall for the beast once he's nice. She sees him accurately while he's still furious, still hiding, still capable of driving her away, and she stays anyway, on her own terms, with her own boundaries intact. That's not a fairy tale about magic, that's a fairy tale about attention. Next episode, we're heading into The Lion King, and a different kind of underworld, exile, ancestral memory, and what happens when the thing you're running from is actually the thing you need to remember. This has been J-Lab with you, me, and beyond. Thanks for looking closer with me. Peace.